Thank you. And
Thank you,
Mr. Carney, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for coming today. I appreciate your remarks. It's obviously that when the Fed Chairman speaks, people listen. This rostrum was full when you started your testimony today, and as was the room. And I think you've enlightened us with a lot of what you've said. And I'd like to review some of that and then try to explore some of these issues around coming up with a plan for fiscal discipline that makes sense. And we've had a little bit back and forth with Mr. Duffy, Mr. Himes, and Mr. Peters as well. You said you support significant reduction in fiscal deficits, but you've also warned us against what you cautioned us against what you called sharp cuts in the short term. Could you characterize in any kind of way the kinds of cuts, the kinds of programs? I know you've tried to shy away from that kind of a thing, but we have discretionary domestic spending, we have discretionary military spending, we have mandatory military and mandatory domestic, and then we have these big entitlement programs. And I'd just like your view on those kinds of cuts as it relates to your caution about sharp cuts in the short term.
Well, let me preface this by saying that there's already a good bit of fiscal contraction going on in the sense that there was a big run-up in spending related to the stimulus and so on. That is now being withdrawn from the economy. Similarly, the states and localities have been under continuous pressure because of their limitations on their budgets, which has led them to be cutting. So we're already experiencing a good bit of fiscal tightening going on, and that's part of the reason why there are some headwinds in the economy. I can't really pick and choose among programs. I mean, you certainly want to think about the efficacy and the desirability of these programs on their own merits, of course, but I just want to be clear that cutting programs or raising taxes in ways that will reduce aggregate demand, the spending, and the ability of consumers to meet their bills and to purchase goods and services is going to slow the economy, and that's in turn going to offset some of the benefits of the cuts because it'll reduce revenues and make the deficit worse in the short term.
So let me suggest an approach based on the chairman's graphs that he displayed on the screen, which showed basically entitlement program spending that created the real challenge in the long-term deficits. And you said yourself that the long-term deficits were really the problem. So is that to suggest that the structure of those entitlement programs is really what we ought to focus on in terms of the long term, and then in the short term, maybe a different kind of an approach?
Yes. I mean, I don't think anybody's really proposing big cuts in, say, Medicare, this year. But
as the chairman pointed out and others, and you just have to look at the graphs to see that Medicare and health care spending generally, whether you're talking about Medicare, Medicaid, military health care, is the big 10,000-pound gorilla.
That's right. I was going to say that this graph shows a very long-run trend that we have to be worried about. But that means, again, that this is a long-term problem that we have, and we need to address it over a period of time. Certainly, entitlements are part of the picture, and we'll need to look at those and make sure that that they are providing the support and medical care that they are intended to provide at the least possible cost. That's an important thing for us to be doing. But again, that's a long-term issue. That's something that's going to take place over not just 10 years, but maybe 20 or 30. But the more we can do now to persuade the markets and the public that we are serious about this and are making changes, that the better we'll.
And that's kind of the point with respect to having a plan in place.
A plan in place
when you raise the debt ceiling, right? I mean, it's important to raise the debt ceiling, and it's important to have a plan in place, is what I heard you say earlier.
Those are two legs, both important.
So let me just explore with the 30 seconds I have left the interchange you had with Mr. Duffy. Mr. Duffy said putting people back to work. Will we be able to put people back to work by raising taxes? And I think I heard you say that it depends on how you do that. And if maybe I could reframe that. Can we strengthen our economy in the long term with additional tax revenues, maybe through tax reform or some other way?
Well, again, with the preface that these are congressional decisions, I think that, taxes, the structure of the tax code matters a lot. So, for example, the incentives are most affected by the marginal tax rates, and that's a very important thing to look at. There may be tax expenditures or tax exclusions, et cetera, which are maybe just government spending in disguise, or just breaks that are not really achieving anything, and that might be a place that you would look and still be able to maintain or even lower marginal tax rates and improve the efficiency of the tax code in that way. I think most economists agree that broadening the base by eliminating breaks and cutting or at least maintaining marginal tax rates gives you a better tax system, promotes growth.
So you think additional revenue has to be part of the picture?
I'm not, again, this is your decision, but I'm just talking about how tax code should be structured.